Well, this morning I want to talk to you a little bit about church building. And of course, that makes sense because Jesus talks in the gospel this morning about building his church. And oftentimes, when we're reading the gospel and we hear these geographic places, and then they went to Caesarea Philippi. You may have gone to the Holy Land, or you may not have, but it doesn't really ring a bell because it's not our environment. And if you even have gone, it's changed a lot since he was there. And so we sometimes imagine that they're walking in a kind of dreamscape without any other competing buildings or ideas or places. And so it's important to understand that when Jesus says to Peter, "I will build my church on you," it's not the first church being built in that neighborhood. It is a place that has already been filled with other proposals and buildings. And the first one, right near where Jesus spoke, so we think, is a large cave. In fact, some people thought it was the cave that led to the underworld. And it's no mistake that when Jesus says, "The gates of Hades will not prevail against you," well, there were some people who thought, well, the gates of Hades are right over there. And it wasn't just a place where people thought you can go into hell from here. They had their view of the world was much more holistic than ours. They said, well, you can get into hell over there, you can get into heaven over here. Most of us are walking away in sort of a vague, well, I don't know if there's anything, but maybe there is. I don't know how to get there. Or most modern people just go, hell is here. We've made hell. We're living in hell. That's sort of modern people. But ancient people, they had this large cave, and they thought that it was a grotto for the god Pan. Maybe you remember the Greek god Pan. He had little hooves, and he played the pan flute. Played the little flute. God of shepherds, god of sex, god of passion and animalistic intensity. And so they would take goats, and they would offer them to Pan, and they would throw them into this cave, and there was water, and the goats, and they built a little grotto to Pan. They even built a temple to Pan. So when Jesus says, "I'm going to build my church on you, Peter," it's interesting that he's going to build a mobile church on a person and not a place. But the neighborhood he's saying this already has a place of worship, a place to kind of reach out to the shepherding God and to offer him goats and to hope that he doesn't get mad at you and do mean things to you. Now, it's not the only church, actually, they built there. Herod the Great, who, if you remember, tried to assassinate Jesus as a baby, thinking if he smothered him in the crib, he wouldn't have a political competitor when he grew up, sort of that cruel calculation of succession. And a lot of our TV shows are based on that, whether it's Game of Thrones or Succession. Now it happens in a corporate boardroom rather than a medieval mead hall or something like that. But Herod the Great actually built another little temple by this cave, and it was a temple to the Emperor Augustus. The Emperor Augustus, who, as a politician, had been turned into a god. And it is the human temptation to say, well, all of this other stuff, Pan, let the people have their caves and their goats. But if you really want to play the game, you worship politicians. You worship people that have power, real power. And so Augustus, they turned into a god, and they built a temple there. And you may remember that Augustus had a wife, Livia, and she poisoned so many people that she was purported to have said, "I hope they make me a god, or I will be sent to hell for what I've done." She doesn't want to go down in the cave. She'd rather be in the temple with her husband, Augustus. And so when Jesus is proposing, "On this rock I will build my church," he is doing it in the face of two major alternatives. One, the worship of power and endowing human beings with godlike characteristics, an early version of totalitarianism. This human being will be responsible for everything, and what they say is what we all do. Or a kind of, we live in this world that is natural. We'll kind of connect to the world of nature. We may even worship the world of nature, and we hope that we can find some good fortune in all of this. You'll remember, these dark caves where people were just throwing their hopes to try and make a better life. The Israelites had a bad history with this, which included sacrificing children to the god Moloch. For the sake of economic prosperity and security, we will sacrifice the children. And the reason I'm bringing this up isn't to give you a little lecture in ancient religion. All of these impulses are the same today. All of these impulses, I need to try and find a way. I will throw what I have into the void and hope that it will make my life a little bit better. I will invest myself in the power of sex because it's reproductive and it's something that makes me feel more human. I will invest myself in the power of politics and say this is the main thing and the only thing. I will sacrifice those who are vulnerable for the sake of economic prosperity. and for the sake of security. These are all impulses that human beings have, and in the midst of this, Jesus says, "On you I will build my church." I will build something different. I will build a different kind of community, a different kind of people, and it will grow and grow and grow. Pan's not going to be able to resist it. Augustus isn't going to be able to resist it. I'm going to build something that cannot be changed. And in fact, later on, Plutarch, the Greek writer who became a Roman, he lived about the time of St. Paul, he told a very famous story where there was an Egyptian sailor named Thumos, and Thumos is sailing, and he hears a voice from heaven say, "The great god Pan is dead." And then he went to a dock and he said, "The great god Pan is dead." And people go, "Oh my gosh, Pan is dead." And then they'd spread it around the ancient world, and they wondered, who killed Pan? Or how did this religion end? How is this no longer a force in the world? And the early Christians said, "Sorry, we did that." Or actually, we didn't do that. He did it with the resurrection. The resurrection was his verification that this would be the power in the world. So it could not be competed with the kind of pagan darkness, the cave, and the necessary goats. It could not be competed with the hot fire of the demons taking in the Israelite babies. It could not be competed even with someone as powerful as Augustus, who has all the mechanisms of the Roman Empire at his fingertips. The great god Pan is dead because the God of the Christians is alive. That was the claim. Now, all of that may sound very ancient and foreign, so we won't spend too much more time in the ancient world except to say that Jesus makes this proclamation after they ask the fundamental question, "Who do you say that I am?" This is the question, and it is a question addressed to everyone in the world, and everyone can offer whatever answer they want. Some people can say, "Well, Jesus was a nice guy. You know, he was sort of like a early hippie. He walked around, long hair, and he had sandals, and he just peace and love, and he just wanted to make his own way. He didn't have, Haight-Ashbury. He didn't make it to San Francisco, but he made it as close as he could to get there." So you could say that Jesus is sort of a benign moral figure. He's just another guy that was a dreamer in the world. Jesus was a Jewish teacher. Jesus was merely contained by his time and his space. I mean, if we ask this question, "Who do you say that Jesus is?" we would get an interesting multitude of answers. And so the options range from he was just a guy to he's God. And depending on where you land on that spectrum will depend on what church you end up in. And make no mistake, you end up somewhere. Everyone worships something. Everyone belongs to some community of belonging that has ultimate principles that operate in a religious perspective, even if they've stripped away all religious language and meaning. Everyone operates in a fundamental community where human beings express themselves because we were made to express ourselves this way. And so depending on where you answer that question, that's where you might end up in this roving church that began on the back of Peter. Who do you say that I am? This is an interesting question each of us must live out. Who do you say that I am? And living into the answer can be frightening. It will increase your vulnerability. It will increase your commitment to those who are different than you and need your aid and your love and your compassion. It will ruin your life, at least the life you imagine for yourself. And it will give you the life that God imagined for you. Jesus tells the disciples this all the time. They go, "Oh God, we're so great following you. We finally found the secret key to power. We finally found the secret key to enlightenment. We finally found the secret key to becoming better than other people. We're supercharged. We're not like all the other people." And Jesus goes, "Yes, you have found that. So lose your life and I will give it to you." And they say, "Well, wait a minute. What'd you say? Lose your life and I will give it to you." No, I don't want to lose my life. I want to take the life I have, and I just want to add you on top of it so I can have even more life, and I'll have like sort of the secret ingredient that other people don't have. No, I need you to die. I don't want to die. I want to live. Nope, you have to die. And then just trust that I'll give you your life back. No, I don't think I want to do that. I was just hoping to use you as sort of a super additive, and I don't want to entrust my dying to you, my living and dying to you. It's the same thing when Jesus says, "Okay, good, you think you found the way?" And they go, "Yes, we found the way. So you think we're going to be great with you in the kingdom of heaven?" And Jesus says, "Pick up your cross." Christianity will ruin your life, the life you imagined, but it will open a pathway to life that allows for the kind of mutuality and self-giving where we are not discarding vulnerable people, where we are not hiding from the suffering of others, where our living and our dying has a meaning that is being erased in the reductive economy that most of us are living in otherwise. Christianity is opening a way to a full humanity. This is one of the great quotes of the early church. Human beings fully alive are the glory of God. It is not meant to diminish human life. It is meant to accentuate it and make it the fullest version of itself that allows for the most people and the most mutuality to exist in common. Now that's my niece who's sitting back there right now. She's going to UC Santa Cruz. She's transforming into a banana slug as we speak. Are they the banana slugs? Okay, good. That would be mean to say that otherwise. If she was like, well, why are you saying that? That's not nice. But we were doing, she came to homeless bingo at the Navigation Center. And one of the guys that we talked to the most has stage 4 cancer. He has a giant port in his carotid artery. He had overdosed on fentanyl over in the Bolsa Chica parking lot. He said, I go, oh, I'm sorry someone did that to you. He goes, no, I did it. He goes, I figured I'm dying, I might as well try everything. And then he realized that wasn't a good idea. But I told her on the way home, I go, what kind of society do we have that a man who's nearing death is in he's living in a homeless shelter, being transported to medical care? What kind of place have we created where people who are dying might die on our streets? You know, that's the world. We've created it. It's not someone else. So we can't go, who did that? We did that. But when you have people of faith and people of a higher commitment that say, but we can do more than that. We can make more space. You wouldn't say, well, is he a good person? He's not a good person. And he'll tell you he's not by the things he told my niece, that he shared with my niece. It's not a question of, if the person's good enough, we help them. It's a question of, this is the image of God suffering outside. Now they've given him a bed to sleep in, but he's a skeleton with a port in his neck playing bingo. And it's like, is this the best we can do? And this is the question we have to ask ourselves as church. Is this the best we can do? And this is the creativity and the commitment to a different way of living, to this kingdom that's being built on a rock, a different kind of rock, a solid rock that you can build on, where in fact life is enhanced, not just for us, but for everyone. That's so funny. I was like, I'm going to preach less today because Michelle's doing her thing, and then the praise team's going to come in. We'll just be a little late. I'll just make 1 or 2 more comments about it. The prophet Isaiah told us today, look to the rock from which you were hewn. This is a great question for each of us, not just to say, who do you say that Jesus is, but to ask yourself about your spiritual geology. Where did you come from? And it's not a question of your genetics. It's not a question of your Ancestry.com. Like my step-aunt yesterday, she pulled out a huge form that she made of our family history. And we couldn't believe that she was more invested in our family than we are. None of us have done that. Oh, but she put together a big book, and we were looking through pictures and videos. And from 1949 until about the mid-'80s, we watched videos and looked at pictures for 5 hours, talking, putting together the story of my mother's family, remembering people, telling stories, thinking about where they came from. Who was this person? Who was that person? Pictures we'd never seen, videos we'd never seen. People we go, that was your aunt? I didn't know you had an aunt. Shows how invested we were in I didn't know we had that person in our family. But what we were doing is we were reconnecting with where we came from. That was the whole point. Before my uncle dies, we need to reconnect with the beginning and connect to those stories that may have been forgotten. And the prophet Isaiah is saying the same thing. It's not a question of your genetic family, it's a question of your spiritual family. What is the quarry from which God hewn you? Hew you. I don't know what the past participle of hewn. From which you were hewn, where did God quarry you? And notice he says, look to Abraham, look to Sarah, look to the beginning of the story of faith. These are your spiritual ancestors, and God has made you a rock. So God doesn't say, you were taken from a quarry, but you're not a rock. You were just some chalk. No, it's like a marble quarry where there's nothing but marble. You know, it's like the David statue that Michelangelo carved, and he got the big chunk of stone, and everyone goes, oh, look at that chunk of stone, and he goes, no, David's in that stone. And Michelangelo claimed that he could see David in the stone before David ever came out of the stone. And this is the idea that when God sees Oh, that's so good. See, Rowan has a free pass. If anyone's wondering, Rowan has a free pass to wander around because church is deadly for toddlers. It's like, and now sit a little longer while he talks. It's like. But when Michelangelo saw the stone of marble, he could see the person coming out. And when God looked at you, when you were first made, God saw the person God wanted to draw out, God wanted to carve, God wanted to see. And if you look at that statue of David, he has a big hand. Some people say, well, he had a big hand so that it would be in proportion when you looked up at it where Michelangelo thought it was. Other people think his hand is big because that's all he's going to have is God's power to fight the giant Goliath. God sees you and God endows you with special gifts so that you can be in the world doing your work, you can be in the world engaged in your struggle, and you might have nothing but the promise from God. This is your spiritual family where you came from, you are part of it, and now live it, and live it out. And you'll notice the prophet Isaiah says, the world is like a tired garment. Well, that feels familiar. The heavens will go away in a cloud. Well, maybe soon, like this idea that the world feels more tired. Certainly, if you look at all the wildfires and everything happening around the world and everything. I don't know what's happening in heaven, so I won't comment on that necessarily with the heavens passing away. But what God says in the prophet Isaiah is, there is a newness I am bringing. And it is a newness that comes out of that quarry where you were hewn. It is a newness blessed in your faith, and you are an ambassador of the future. You do not represent a world that is passing away, a kind of, well, we used to worship Pan, but that kind of played itself out. You are representing the world that is to come. You are ambassadors from a future where people will realize what it is that God will do everywhere, all the time. And so I hope that you will answer that question for yourself. Who do you say that Jesus is? I hope that you will find a way to look toward your spiritual ancestry and realize the stone from which you were hewn, and you will be bold in doing holy and Christian work, especially engaging Christ in the stranger, engaging Christ in the convict, the cancer-ridden homeless bingo player, certainly your neighbor. And you will have a sign that by showing and meeting God in that place, he will make all things new. Amen.